Season has just started, but there are plenty of questions about the Heat, both this season and beyond. What's wrong with Miami's offense? Why can't Jimmy and Bam shoot more? And what's the latest on Giannis Antetokounmpo? We open up the mailbag to answer that and more on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. Jam-packed mailbag for you today. We've got questions about the offense and the defense, and a question about a potential star who could be on the trade market. But first, your favorite podcast now is a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Let's open up the mailbag. We're going to jump right into this first question from Malachi, who writes this one via our Locked On Heat Insider community. He writes in, do you think the Miami Heat has a chance to get Giannis like I've been seeing today? So, David, just a quick background here. The trade rumors around Giannis are starting to percolate a little bit here. The first time I heard it, I don't know the first time that you saw something, but the first time I heard something was on Bill Simmons' podcast. He had Kirk Goldsberry on his show earlier in the week, and Goldsberry, who worked in the league and knows he worked in the San Antonio Spurs front office for a few years, obviously a longtime Grantland guy, and now I guess he's back with the Ringer, but was telling Simmons, word is along front offices in the NBA, like people are monitoring Giannis' situation in Milwaukee, and it makes sense. And since then, you've seen this rumor pop up in other places. But again, it makes sense, right? It doesn't take a leap to figure out where this is coming from. The Bucks are bad. Giannis is very good. And it doesn't really, but the Bucks are old and they're cash strapped. And like today, they're not even picking up their option on Marjon Beauchamp. So it's just like another one of those rookies that they drafted that just didn't pan out. Right. And it just doesn't really feel like there's a way to get out of this place that they're in, because nobody's going to be trading for Chris Middleton. Brook Lopez is going to be a free agent. Maybe they could trade Dame, but what are you really getting for Damian Lillard at this point in his career? And is that going to be enough to rebuild around a very much in his prime, but now 30 years old, Giannis Antetokounmpo? And so, you've heard Giannis make imply that, hey, if things don't work out this year, I could get traded. And I think it was kind of funny when he made that comment earlier in the year, because it's like, no, dude, like the Bucks will never trade you unless you ask to get traded. But hey, maybe he will ask to get traded, because this guy is somebody who wants to compete. He wants to win. He wants to compete for championships. He wants to win multiple titles. And if he comes to the decision that it looks like it's not going to happen in Milwaukee, well, then we're going to see him do what every other star in his position basically has done in this era, and that's move, right? And so. Yeah. If he's somebody that gets on the trade market, do you think that the Heat have a chance to get him, to Malachi's question?
Depends on what they're willing to trade. I'm not sure what the right fit is in terms of who would be Miami's best trade asset. It would probably have to be Bam Adebayo. And I think that's the opening discussion there. Can you shift Miami's complete identity into moving Bam Adebayo in order to acquire a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo? I don't know. The two can't coexist. They cannot play together. There's just inherent limitations in what they can do. You look at the way Brook Lopez has evolved alongside, and I know this was a transformation that was taking place even before he joined the Bucks, but you have to have a floor spacing big. You can't just have somebody who clogs the paint. And right now, with Bam and his limited shooting, I just don't think that you can have him and Giannis on the same roster at the same time. So it would be a huge shift for Miami in order to acquire a player like Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know that they'd be interested. This kind of ties into a lot of questions that we've gotten about trading Jimmy and trading Bam and things of that sort. I don't know that the Milwaukee Bucks would be interested in acquiring Jimmy Butler at his age and given his salary and his salary demands. I don't know that they're willing to trade him at all, to be 100% honest with you, because this is such a rare instance where this is a player who's already won a championship, and this was with the franchise that drafted him, and this is with a team that he's played for his whole career. I don't think that they're looking to move him. I think they would rather say, you know what, we screwed the pooch. We tried to go all in and acquire Dame Lillard. Chris Middleton unfortunately broke down sooner than we expected. Let's try and figure out a way of retooling and appeasing Giannis rather than just saying, you know what, let's go ahead and blow the whole thing completely up. So if you were asking me my opinion, I don't think Giannis is getting moved anytime soon. And if that's the case, I don't know that Miami is really positioned to acquire him anyway, given some of the trade assets that are available from teams around the league that probably eclipse what Miami could potentially offer, short of Bam Adebayo.
So Giannis has 3 more years left on his contract. He just signed an extension.
Player
So
option,
I tend to side with you where it's like, I don't see Milwaukee getting to the point where they're going to trade Giannis, because I still, like, it looks bad right now. I still think that the Bucks are going to win 45 plus games this year, you know? And
what can I shift the question here? Like, what, I mean, we're talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo, but if they're ready to blow things up in Milwaukee, the more likely trade target is Dame Lillard, and this is somebody that was Miami was very interested in acquiring just a year and a half ago.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally on the table. Like, if Milwaukee comes to the conclusion that, hey, we just got to get younger, get a little bit deeper around Giannis, and even if trading Dame right now doesn't make us a title contender right now, it gives us the flexibility to maybe do something in the next year or so that does make us a contender. And right now they're just short on depth, and they're short on prospects. They're short on rotation players. And the one thing is, if Miami does show interest in Damian Lillard again, the one thing they can offer is a bunch of rotation players, right? They're not going to offer a star at the same caliber as Dame. So I think that is certainly more on the table than a Giannis trade. Or, I mean, not on the table, more realistic and being on the table sometime soon, more so than a Giannis trade. But if we're going to talk about the Giannis rumor here, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's Jaime, Nico, draft picks, Tyler Hero, even with his Milwaukee connections. That's not enough to get Giannis. Come on. Every team in the league is going to come out of the woodwork trying to get Giannis. The Warriors will offer everything that's not nailed down to Chase Center and name Steph Curry, right? And so the Lakers would probably go after Giannis. And I hear you with the fit. To me, I'm at the point of, if you get Giannis, fit be damned. Just go get him, figure it out the fit later. You know, sometimes the talent level is just such that you got to go do it. That said, it probably would cost Bam. That's probably what it's going to take, because you don't have the draft picks, man. Like, you don't have the picks. Like, San Antonio, Houston, Oklahoma City. Like, these teams could go out and just be like, I don't know, we got like 20 picks in the next 4 years. Let's just throw them all and go get Giannis. Yeah, exactly. Like, the Heat can't compete with that. What they can do is offer a top 15 player that every team in the league would like, and that's Bam Adebayo. And say what you want about his offense and all these things, every team in the league would like him right now. Would you do that for somebody like Giannis? Considering what Bam means to this franchise, you got Dwayne Wade talking about Bam's the next guy with the statue. You know, everything that they've built around Bam, how much he means to this organization. He seems foundational at this point, and yet I think if you're looking at this objectively, you would have to say, yeah, if we can get Giannis, you kind of do it. As tough as it would be, but then the next question becomes, how do you build around that? Because then you just become the new Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis and aging stars around him.
Yeah. I don't think they'd do it. I really don't think
they would either. And that's not
personally,
even our opinion. But I agree with you. Yeah.
Personally, I wouldn't do it. And then secondly, I don't think the franchise would do it. You know, the 2016, 2014, those were such pivotal moments in how the team was defined and perceived around the league. And they've tried very hard and actively to rebuild that trust. We were kind of joking, I think it was yesterday, talking about how Miami invented the welcome back thank you for players that had barely played on this roster. But a lot of that was conscious and understanding, look, we want to rebrand ourselves as a family organization. And you hear the verbiage from Pat Riley, Udonis Haslem, and Dwayne himself. You know, it's very much a part of how this team wants to be perceived as a family. And not
can I push back on that, though? I think they would rather be perceived as a winner. And if they thought that Giannis could deliver a championship, I think they would trade Bam in a heartbeat. I really do. I don't think I think the calculus would be I think the calculus is, even if we trade Bam for Giannis, what's the route to being a championship team other than just being marginally better than what we're at now? And that's sort of what I come back. The Heat have been trying, if anything, in these star acquisitions, are trying to get Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, whatever it is. They're trying to steal these guys for next to nothing. And that has been the front office's MO. They did it with Jimmy Butler. They signed LeBron James, and it cost them 1 first-round pick to maneuver a sign and trade to get that done. They try to steal these guys. They try to get them for much less than market value. They don't ever, and have never, paid market price for a star player. Pat Riley's not going to do it. And it has bit them in the past because you didn't end up with Dame. You didn't end up with Kevin Durant. You didn't end up with some of these guys. But at the same time, they've never overpaid for a star and got bit that way and just been saddled with a guy. In terms of assets, they've overpaid players. Sure. But in terms of overpaying for assets, they haven't been stuck in that way. And so that's where I'm at is I think they would look around the league and say, can we get Giannis to force himself to Miami and maybe get him for something less than market value and figure out a way to pair him with Bam Adebayo, despite some of the fit concerns that are certainly there. Bam might be in the early phase of his Brook Lopez transformation if and when he starts taking threes and making them consistently. But that's where I think that's how I think they would try to do it. And if they can't do it, then they just won't do it because they just haven't done it.
I hear all that, and at the same time, I know this may be a whole conversation for another segment or another show, but I don't think Miami could trade Bam. Like, I just really don't. I think being perceived as a winner is one thing, but they've already got that reputation. We talked about that with Dwayne. Like, this is now kind of a legacy franchise with 3 championships, multiple trips to the finals, etc. Like, they've done more than their fair share of winning. I don't know that they'd be willing to risk that. Certainly on the calculus as you perceive it, it makes a lot of sense. Like, acquiring Giannis is not necessarily a surefire way to become a title contender based on what you'd have to give up in order to acquire him and what you surround him with. But if you trade Bam, like, this is a guy who, again, like you just said, you were talking, it's one thing to let Bam walk. It's another thing, like they did Dwayne in 2016 or LeBron in 2014. It's another thing to look him in the eye and to hype him up and to call him the captain multiple times, to name him the captain of this team, a franchise centerpiece, a foundational player, and say, sorry, buddy, we got somebody better in mind. Like, you cannot do that. I just don't think that's how it works.
We're going to switch gears and ask questions about this new 5-out offense and why it's not maximizing Miami's most important players. We'll talk about that next here as we continue along our mailbag on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Sometimes you're watching a game. Guess what? You get a hunch in the middle of the game. You want to check out the latest stats, or maybe you want to see some live play-by-play. Well, you can do that and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. But first of all, you've got to go visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, but only by visiting FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more at FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. If you want to guarantee that your questions will be answered in our mailbags going forward and on our post-game shows, sign up to the Locked On Heat Insider community. You could sign up with the link in the show notes below. This next question comes from Yo-Yo305 on Twitter, who writes in, why is this quote-unquote new offense affecting Bam and Jimmy Butler? Isn't your offense supposed to be built around your stars? ? David, I think this is a fair question. One of my sort of NBA rules is your job isn't for your stars. Your job as a front office and a coaching staff isn't to make your stars carry you. It's to make the life for your stars easier so that they can carry you. And it feels like right now that life isn't easier for Jimmy Butler, and really it's not easier for Bam. And I think on the Jimmy Butler front, he's making it hard on himself. He should be able to thrive in a 5-out offense. And by the way, I think with that second unit, he does. I think he does thrive in a little bit more space with Duncan Robinson setting those screens. Like, all of that stuff is built to make life for Jimmy easier. I want to focus here on Bam because the offense is very clearly not working in his favor. And I rewatched the Knicks game from last night. And not only is he passing up shots, but he's hesitating to even take the shots that he usually took. And, I remember Tyler Hero saying this recently, like, he doesn't remember the last time a Heat player took a mid-range shot in practice. And we know what Eric Spoelstra spent the time in the Bahamas in the preseason trying to do, expunging the mid-range shot from the shot diet. He doesn't want the Heat taking those mid-range shots anymore. And the argument for that is sound, right? They were way over-indexed on mid-range shots last year. It was inefficient. There was a reason they were never going to climb out of the bottom 10 in offense if they took that many mid-range shots. It just wasn't going to happen mathematically. So you had to find a way to trade those out for more threes and for more shots at the rim. And I think for the most part, it's worked. Like we've seen Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, the Heat overall up their 3-point shooting volume. We've seen them get to the rim more, a lot of these guys. The player that it's negatively impacted the most has been Bam, because his sweet spot last year was that free throw line jumper that he would get out of that pick and roll, take that first step into it, and just shoot in rhythm. And there was literally a possession, I think it was in the first quarter of that Knicks game, where he steps right into that free throw line jumper, and I think it's Josh Hart that's next to him, and he should be able to shoot over that guy every single time, and did last year, and made that at a 45% clip. But you could see he kind of lifts his arm as if to shoot it, and then he hesitates, because you can almost see or hear Eric Spoelstra's voice in his head being like, no, we're not taking mid-range shots anymore. And he kind of fumbles with the ball a little bit, and he ends up turning it over. So instead of getting that in-rhythm free throw line jumper that he loves so much, the Heat get a turnover, and now the ball's going the other way, and the Knicks score. And I do wonder if Bam's just... I don't wonder. I'm watching the film, and I'm saying, this guy doesn't know where to take his shots anymore, because he's not a guy who gets to the rim. The three-point shot is a very new thing to him. I don't think he's comfortable with it. I think that's very clear. He's passing up threes all the time now too. This guy doesn't know where his offense is coming from, and that's a problem in an offense that on a team where you should to Yo-Yo 305's question here, making things easier for your star players. And right now, Bam seems lost.
Did you ever see the movie Major League?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, remember the first one, Wesley Snipes' character, Willie Mays Hayes? Like every time he kept popping the ball up in foul territory, his manager made him do push-ups. Like, I feel like that's what's happened with the Heat and the mid-range shot. Like every time somebody had to take a mid-range shot, Spo made them do push-ups or something, or made them run laps around the court or something, because now they're all so focused on not taking mid-range shots. Like, to your point, they don't know what to take. And they're doing this in the middle of games where these were easy opportunities, because shooting is so much about rhythm. And they've completely lost it because they're just so focused right now on not taking the wrong shots that they don't know how to take the right ones either. So it's a problem. And I know Spo kind of addressed it after the Knicks game yesterday, but I don't know that there's a solution here, because if Bam isn't comfortable taking the shots that he's supposed to take in the 3-point range, and now he's no longer comfortable taking the shots that he used to take, that he was comfortable with in the mid-range, what else is there? So at some point, you either have to undo the brainwashing or just let them know, let it fly from anywhere and we'll figure it out. And I don't know that Bam is kind of wired that way, because he's always waited for the play to break down and to find a way to get the best shot going, which is part of what makes him a really good player and a really unselfish one. But it's also been kind of self-imposed blinders, kind of like putting a mental block where you can't take a certain shot. And
if you're Eric Spoelstra, you have two decisions, right? You either tell Bam, all right, let it fly, let it go. Like you get to take these mid-range shots, and this had an adverse effect, and I'm sorry. But then that opens like the floodgates to just take more mid-range shots, and so you have like two opposing goals here, right? One is let's get Bam going, but the problem with getting Bam going is now you're taking those mid-range shots that bring the offense overall down.
Right.
And so what's the priority? Is it to get the offense up, and now Bam is an 11 point per game scorer? Or is it, and by the way, Bam's also shooting percentage is very low. Like Bam will shoot better. Like he's going to shoot better. He's going to shoot probably, I would imagine. Yeah, you do hope. But I think if he keeps this current shot diet, he's not going to be back up to 20 points per game, maybe 14, 15. So you say instead of 11. And so now you say, okay, like, are you a 15 point per game player now? Are we done with all-star appearances for you? Right? Are you just a defensive player? Are you souped up Rudy Gobert in this system? And that would be problematic, I think. And
so.
I also think it's a little bit on Bam to say, okay, well, Tyler Hero figured it out. He's a catch and shoot guy. He adjusted his game. He completely rewired his game. And now he's comfortable with it to the point where he's taking 12 and then 13 3-point attempts per game. Most of them catch and shoot variety. What does that look like for Bam? We know that he's trying to expand his game to the 3-point line. He needs to get more comfortable with it. You pointed this out very astutely, I thought, in the postgame show. There was like 2 attempts in the first half that he hesitates. He doesn't really know what to do. He needs to not hesitate. He needs to just let that go. But even that, I mean, what are we talking about? 3, 4, 5 3-point attempts per game? That's not a whole shot diet. That's not your whole arsenal. That's not the whole shot chart. So what does the rest of it look like? Can he attack guys off the dribble? Can he get to the basket more? Heck, I see Chet Holmgren in Oklahoma City taking guys off the dribble and getting to the basket. Bam needs to be doing that more. So I think it is on Bam to just figure out, okay, this mid-range shot doesn't work for my team anymore. And I'm this unselfish guy. I need to
Mhm.
figure out a way to create offense for myself and do it at an efficient volume or at an efficient clip to the point where I'm able to help this offense grow overall. And by the way, for the record, I don't think Bam is complaining. I think he is trying to figure this out. But
He is.
there needs to be a getting out of his own head because, and you said this a lot, he's not a natural scorer. Even to the point of him becoming, I think, a 20-point per game scorer over the last couple of years is a minor miracle. You looked at this guy's game at Kentucky, there was none of this in his game. Like, he has worked
It's
really hard to
begrudgingly
get to this.
accepted. Yeah.
Yeah, he's worked so hard to get to this point, and now you're telling him, hey, all the work you've done over the last 3 years to get to this point, you kind of have to scratch all of that and figure out a new way to score. Because it took him years to develop that mid-range jumper. So this ain't easy, man. Like, this stuff is not easy. So
Is the ceiling for the team's offense higher when you unlock Terry and Tyler in the
Yes.
backcourt and their shooting options? Yeah, I agree.
I mean, just the efficiency stuff, right? It's what we keep talking about. Give me the threes over the twos. You know, that's just that's what it is. But then how does Bam find his place in that? All right. We're going to turn our sights on to Jimmy Butler. What's the best we can expect from him? Plus, do the Heat need to make a change to the starting lineup? We'll talk about all of that next year as we continue our mailbag on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime and their new feature, Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite events live even easier than ever before. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You don't want to deal with that. You're looking, maybe sometimes buying tickets can even be a little impulsive. That's part of what makes it fun. It's like, you know what? There's a concert in town. Maybe you're traveling for business. You get out of a meeting early. You're like, oh, let's go catch a game or something like that. It's fun. It's supposed to be. And guess what? Gametime helps you out, says they just filter out all that stuff so you just get to exactly what you want and you find the prices that you're looking for right away. And not only that, but they've got their all-in pricing so that you know the total upfront, no worrying about surprise fees at checkout. Sometimes they hit you with a out-of-town fee or a new stadium fee or something like that. At least that's what I remember. And guess what? You don't have to worry about that because you know exactly what you're paying right away. You know exactly where you're going to be sitting to. It's so convenient when you download the app and see exactly where you're going to be sitting in a venue that you might not be familiar with. I love that feature. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Our next mailbag question comes from Adam, who writes in, is this the best Jimmy can be at this point? So, a bad game against Orlando Magic to open the season, 2 good games against Charlotte and then Detroit, and then a bad game against the New York Knicks. Do you think this is more of a matter of playing worse against better teams, or just the way the schedule breaks? And with Jimmy Butler, you're only going to get maybe it's going to be like, 2 good games, 2 bad games, and that's just going to be the way that things sort of break down within a week. Because he's 35 years old, maybe he just doesn't have the legs in him anymore. I think that's totally plausible also. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think most of the struggles against Orlando and New York were probably based on the matchups and the players that he was facing, and they were defending him and kind of taking him away from the more comfortable aspects of his offensive repertoire. So I mean, you rewatched the game. Isn't that kind of your takeaway in terms of Jimmy? Was it just a matter of him being not aggressive, or were they doing a good job of defending him and keeping him from the kind of looks that he's so accustomed to over the years, in addition to him trying to find his place in the balance of the offense, the new offense?
It's yes. To all of that, the answer is yes. Look, you got to give credit to Orlando's defense. When we did our post-game show, we gave all the credit in the world to the Orlando Magic and barely even blamed the Miami Heat for that loss. Although certainly Jimmy Butler could have been much better, and I do think if you replay that game, the Heat fare a lot better than the blowout that it was. But I think they still probably lose that game. I think the Magic are just a better basketball team at this stage. But
maybe,
at this stage in the season, I think definitely maybe the Heat can get better. Yeah. And then with the Knicks, I mean, OG Anunoby is a tough matchup for Jimmy Butler, but you know what? You're a star player. You're supposed to take these tough matchups and beat them, right? Great offense in the NBA beats great defense. That's just the way it always has been. And for this, it just feels like he knows when he doesn't have it, or he knows when the matchup isn't worth it. And maybe this is just, it's the first month of the season. I still going to need to preserve myself for the playoffs, and my stats will look just fine by the end of the year if It's like if I'm beating up on the bad teams. And maybe he just decides some nights it's not worth it. Like, I totally think that's a way that Jimmy Butler would think. And I'm wondering if that's what happened last night against the Knicks, where he saw the OG Anunoby thing and he was like, nope, this is not worth the stress. It's just not worth it for me in the fourth game of the year. Like, I'll wait for the playoffs to do this. And in the meantime, every time Charlotte or Detroit's in town, I'll beat up on those teams and those matchups. Maybe that's all it is. But in terms
then it's not necessarily. It's not to the answer to the question. Then it's not necessarily about how good he can be. It's him simply choosing and picking his spots much more carefully and consciously.
But I think that's because there's a physical limitation to what he can do, right?
Okay,
like, it doesn't. Like,
that.
Luka is young in his prime. Like, he doesn't need to pick his spots. He's just going to be an MVP caliber player every single night. Jimmy, at 35 years old, I don't think he can do that for 82 games. Heck, we don't even know if he could do it for 65 games. He's never played 65 games in a Heat uniform. I think the idea is that he will, but if he's going to play more games, and maybe he has decided he's got to pick. So I think it's both things. I think there's physical limitations to what he can do at 35 years old. Let's keep it going, though. Christian writes in, is there another team in the league where their two best players can't shoot threes? It's a point we've made a lot. I think the answer is no. I think this is why they want Bam to take threes. And by the way, why doesn't Jimmy Butler take more threes? If you're 35 years old and you're trying to reduce the wear and tear on your body, shouldn't you do what LeBron James has done and take more threes? He seems more reluctant than even Dwayne Wade was at the end of his career to take threes. He takes two. The only time Jimmy Butler takes threes is when he's holding pocket aces and he decides to go in on the pot, right? Like, Jimmy Butler's not taking a three when he's got like a 10 and a 4 and he's like, I don't know, maybe I get a good draw on this. Like, he's not doing it. He's only taking them when he's wide open and he takes that slow moving standstill 3-pointer from the corner. Why isn't he taking more threes? That to me is the weird thing, because I think he can make them. We've seen him make them.
Yeah. What are his totals so far? He's attempting 2. So less than last year to 4 games.
And fewer than Bam, who hasn't even made one yet.
So that is a concern. I think part of it is probably
I have 8 usage for him this year.
Yeah, 8 attempts.
Yep.
4 games. So 2 per game. So yeah,
2 per game. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
so
no.
So
so it's not great. Again, I think part of it is a reluctance on his part. That's just not the natural tendency for him. But we see him train that way. He shoots threes like he can. I think he'd rather
why
see
is he
something
posting
a
it
little
on
bit
Instagram
more.
all the time? Like, I've seen more 3-pointers from him on Instagram than I have in basketball games.
I think it's just, it's not in his nature to shoot to 3 or to think that that's the more comfortable shot. And I don't know. Maybe it's just ego. Maybe it's just like, you know what? This is the strength of my game, is getting to the rim and trying to bully my way and draw fouls, etc. And we saw that work in those 2 games in which he played well. But there are moments where we have to kind of make a conscious decision. It's like, you know what? I have to let it fly. And I don't know that he's quite there yet. So I'm not sure exactly what the answer is.
I'm sorry, if I could defend his decision to do that, because I do think you're right.
Sure.
Like, the strength of his game is driving, getting to the rim, getting fouled, but also impacting defenses, being an advantage creator for Miami. And, he's really the only one on the Heat that can do it, except, like, don't tell that to Tyler Hero, who's been doing that the last two games. But, consistently, Jimmy Butler is the guy who drives to the basket and makes defenses collapse, and that creates shots for others. And in many ways, he's sort of the point guard of the team because of that. And so I understand where he's like, look, the team needs. If he's decided the team does not need me to take threes, the team needs me to drive and kick, then I'm here for that. I am definitely here for that. And when he did that against Detroit and against Charlotte, the offense flowed, and and they were scoring at an efficient clip. The problem is when he does what he did against New York, and you're not a floor spacer, and you're not driving and kicking. So what are you doing out there? You're actually hurting your team by being out there. So you got to pick one of them. If this is going to be a night, Jimmy, where you just don't have the legs to drive and kick against the tough New York Knicks defense, okay. Take the threes then. You got to do something, because you can't just chill in the corner where nobody's going to defend you. And that's where the Heat get into trouble, and that's where it gets even harder for Bam, harder for Tyler and Terry Rozier to play in space, because there's a guy just not defending Jimmy Butler, and he's not moving. So right. I think that's the tough part there. Maybe a little bit of a speed round here. Timmy writes in, if the Heat are going to live and die by the 3, it's going to be a long season, but their defense just looks slow and their rebounding is weak. Against somebody like Towns, wouldn't Khalil Ware be worth a look? So the defense has not been great against these teams. They are, for defensive rating, again, just 4 games into the season, so very small sample size that can be thrown with 1 game, but they're only giving up 1.5 points per 100 possession more defensively this year. and that's with a blowout game against the Orlando Magic. So I think the defense will. I don't know. Maybe we put a pin in the defensive thing because I do have some thoughts and we don't have enough time here. But in terms of Kel'el Ware not getting a look against Karl-Anthony Towns, I thought we might have seen him last night, especially with Bam in foul trouble and Thomas Bryant kind of being up and down throughout the whole game. But we didn't. And clearly the Heat are deciding like Kel'el Ware is not ready. And for the record, I don't know that Kel'el Ware would have helped against Karl-Anthony Towns. If Bam had his hands full with Towns, I don't think a rookie would have fared much better, especially one whose biggest sort of thing that he's working on right now is strength and size, and Towns would have just kind of blown right through him.
Yeah, the physicality would have been a little difficult for him to complain. Maybe, the flip side of that argument is like, well, maybe he can just kind of use his length and he would have been able to alter shots and stuff like that. But that, given the fact that Karl-Anthony Towns does such a good job of combining his strength and quickness, he would probably just elbow his way past them and be able to get easy looks and layups. He's got soft enough touch around the rim where he can score in a number of different ways. You can't block those shots. Like, I don't think he's as good as Khalil is as a shot blocker. At least that's the perception, is that he'll be as good as we think he is. Then I just don't see he's going to be able to alter those shots much.
Should they have played both of them at the same time? Play Kel'el Ware off the ball? Maybe that would have been worth a look. Like last night, I could maybe see that as like, let's keep Bam on Towns, but then just have Ware as sort of this Jaren Jackson Jr. type of weak side shot blocker. But Towns wasn't doing a ton of his damage at the he got to the basket, but it really felt like everything was going in for him. So
yeah, no doubt. He had the 3-point shot falling, but when he was around the basket, it was, he's got a nice hook shot. He's got a really soft baby hook, etc. Like he's got great touch, and so those shots are hard to alter. Like you have to have enough physicality, like Bam, and at the same time you have to have enough size and length, like Ware. So if you combine the two, you probably have the best defender in the league by far. But right now, that's not the case. You have the kind of talent pool split in between two different players, and you can't. Towns was just really dialed up, and I think it was just a bad matchup yesterday. So we've seen Bam defend Towns better. That wasn't the case yesterday.
Katara writes in, and this is our final mailbag question: should Haywood Highsmith start over Nikola Jovic? If Jovic's production enough to justify having a dismal defensive starting five? I think this is a little unfair to Nico in terms of his defense, but I don't think his defense necessarily has been the problem in that starting unit. I don't know that defense has necessarily been a problem in that starting unit, but again, I want to put a pin in that conversation because I do have my thoughts on it. But there's no doubt that Haywood Highsmith would improve the defense of that starting unit. He is arguably one of Miami's best 2 or 3 defenders on the team. So I don't know. I'm open to it. I was open to it before the season. I'd be open to it now, starting Haywood Highsmith. Now, you do lose a little bit of size there, and that would be the main concern. But like I said, I would be open to it.
I'd start him over Terry Rozier at this point. I think that might be the better option.
So Tyler, Highsmith, Jimmy,
Butler,
Nico still, and Bam.
The problem with that is Nico's 3-point shooting hasn't been great.
Yeah.
And Bam is not shooting the threes that we thought he would too. So if we were getting that kind of balance, if Jimmy ups his attempts to 5 per game and he's hitting them at a similar rate than he did last year, then that kind of negates, the fact that Highsmith isn't going to be much of an offensive factor there, and that you're losing whatever Terry Rozier provides. Because I think Tyler is good enough now where he's been creating that offense. Basically, I like the chemistry between him and Rozier. We've talked about that a lot, but I think he would be able to still create opportunities for himself. It's just, I don't know. You need to improve that defense a little bit. The net numbers are not great for that starting lineup. So again, 4-game sample size, maybe he'd help. Maybe you could give him 10 minutes to start, just to see whether or not it works. But I don't know. I'm not feeling desperate.
They've been closing with Jaime. Maybe
Jaime.
Close the first half with Haywood just to give it a little bit of a test run. Give it a look before you commit. But Eric Spoelstra is known to switch up his starting lineups as the season goes on. I wouldn't rule it out, but it does feel a little early 4 games into the year to do that. Although they do need to act with urgency. The tough part of the schedule is coming up. Maybe that's something you try closer to maybe 10 games into the year after you get a little bit more of a look at what this is. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Your favorite podcast now is a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat daily newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.